Hi, I'm Mahila Wilson. This is Right Answers and Gospel channel. We are in this series called Christian Worldview, and we are looking into all different attributes of God and how that shapes our worldview. That's what we are looking into. So in this particular video, we'll be talking about God is holy and God is righteous. So when we say God is holy, what do we mean by that? When we say God is righteous, what do we mean by that? So that's what we are going to look into in this video. So when we talk about God's holiness, we are not merely talking about sinlessness of God, but we are talking about his set apartness. So he is separate, he is cut above, he is above and beyond whatever we are. So that is what God's holiness is. He is separated, he is in his own class, so nobody can reach over to that class. No angels, no humans, no created things can reach that class and be holy like God. We cannot be, we will never be. So that is what God's holiness is. So I wanted to read a quote from A.W. Tozer from The Knowledge of the Holy, so that will give a little bit more clarification on what I'm trying to say here. He says, God's holiness is not simply the best we know, infinitely better. We know nothing like the divine holiness. That's what he says. So what this means is, when we are talking about God's holiness, we are not saying, we are not looking at a person who we know best to be holiest person that we will ever know. The person who is so morally perfect, sinless, that you ever know. And you make it like million times or infinite times more. That is not God's holiness, because that is still a best human's holiness, right? So God's holiness is separate. It is in his own class. We will never be able to cross that line. So that is what it is when we say God is holy. And also, when we talk about God's holiness, we are talking about all other attributes that's also with this holiness. So when we say God is set apart, his love is set apart. No human being can love like God does. And no human being can give grace like God does. And no human being can be righteous like God is. And no human being can produce justice like God does. So all these things. God's love is holy. God's grace is holy. God's righteousness is holy. So it is holy love, holy grace, holy righteousness, holy justice. So all these things, so it is all set apart, above and beyond anything we are and anything we will ever know. So that is what God's holiness simply means. Expressive terminology, what we can see as God's holiness. We will never be able to see God's holiness. We will never be able to comprehend God's holiness in this world. But however, we can see his glory. That is the expression of God's holiness. So it says in Isaiah 6:3, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. So his holy is expressed as his glory. So we can understand that way what God's holy is, but we will never be able to understand fully what God's holy means, because it is a transcendent concept, just like who God is and his being. So next thing we are talking about is God's righteousness. So when we talk about God's righteousness, that is when we are talking about God's sinlessness, his moral perfection, his purity. That is what we are talking about when we talk about God's righteousness. So it is not merely that God is sitting down and figuring out all these standards that he has to meet to become morally perfect, but he is that standard of moral perfection. So he is the standard of perfect morality. So that's how we need to understand. So it's not that he is meeting a standard to be perfect or righteous, but he is righteous. So this standards, every standard that we draw to be morally perfect, or what is sin and what is not, and what is righteousness, all these things are understanding who God is and drawing standards from who he is. So that is what is righteousness is. And that is what is God's righteousness we are talking about. And this righteousness is very, very important to God. Why I say that is because in Romans 3:26 it says, God did this to demonstrate his righteousness. That's what it's saying. So this chapter is talking about how Christ took our punishment on behalf of us. How Christ took our punishment. That is what this chapter, or this part of the chapter, is talking about. And that is where it says God did this to demonstrate his righteousness. So in other words, the incarnation, the penalty that paid on behalf of us, all these things to demonstrate his righteousness to us. So just imagine how important that is, for God to take this kind of step, to come as a human being, to be humiliated and die on the cross, and all these things to demonstrate his righteousness. He wants us to know that he is righteous. That's very, very important. He wants us to know that he's righteous. There is no moral imperfection in him. So if he makes a law, he perfectly punishes every sin. Every sin from Adam to the last person who will ever be born has to be atoned for. And because God is morally perfect, he cannot allow any sin to exist, to be unpunished. He can, as a judge, he cannot let any sin to be unpunished. So to demonstrate his righteousness, that's why all these things he did, to be an incarnate human being. He became a person, a human. He became a human being, mere human being, and he died on the cross to demonstrate his righteousness towards us. And we also wanted to talk about 1 Peter 1:16 says that it is written, "Be holy because I am holy." So in the next week video, we'll be talking about who is this righteous, because Bible says by faith we become righteous, right? We share in Christ's righteousness by our faith. So we will be talking about what is this righteousness that we share, and we will also be talking about what it means to be holy, because our God is holy. So we will talk about those things in the next week video. If you're interested, please come back. If you like this video, please like, share and comment. If you like all our videos, please subscribe to our channel. May God bless you. Thank you so much for you spending your time with us.